Today at Above the Tree Line, I have with me Andy Keller, who is a 42-year veteran from USAA Insurance. Andy, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, Andrew, for letting me talk to you today.
Yeah, well, no, 42 years is pretty amazing, and we're gonna dig into that. And I think before we get started, I just want to acknowledge who USAA is. It used to be known as the U.S. Army's Automobile Association. It was shortened to USAA. I am a client, both our homeowners and auto insurance. I asked my wife before I came up, I said, so what's your experience been with USAA? Because we recently had a claim. She's like, excellent. She said, one of the best companies I've ever worked with. So I think it's just important that we recognize what's going on in the world right now. And, not that USAA has a role in that, but certainly the people that it represents and the families that it works with, we're grateful for them and what they do for us. So
I am not a veteran. I went to the University of Texas at San Antonio, which is about 2 miles from USA's headquarters. And I was sitting in class one day, and Professor Dietrich said, "Hey, USA's coming here to do interviews, and I think you should interview with them." And so I had come from my daytime job, so I was hot and sweaty, and I went down and I talked to the interviewers, and I got a job. And then I had to get my father to tell me how to get there because I didn't know where it was.
Well, we're members of USA in part because my wife's father served, actually, and he was in the Army in San Antonio, and my dad was in the Marine Corps. So,
well, that's awesome.
Yeah,
it's very nice to work or to have worked for a company that had a mission that was about more than just making money.
Yeah, 100%. Amen to that. And we're thinking about those families that got some pretty heavy hearts right now. That's unfortunate. That's right. But
they're in harm's way, and we hope that they stay as safe as possible and they get their mission accomplished and get home as quickly as possible.
Absolutely. Gosh, just so you just described a little bit about your experience with USA. So 42 years. If my math is correct, that's something like 1983, 1984, somewhere in there.
84 is when I started. I started as what they called a co-op, or which we would call an intern today.
Yeah.
Except that interns are typically summer interns, and I went to school and worked at USA 20 hours a week, and it was a program that was a government program to try to get people into IT. And so I worked like that for 18 months, and then I graduated, and I graduated on a Friday and started on a Monday.
Wow. I was trying to stretch my brain a little bit and thinking about 1983, 1984. I'm thinking, so I think the PC had come out, TRS-80s, the Apple II maybe was on the market. I mean, it was a different world back then, but yeah. And you were probably, what was the programming language you were working in at that?
COBOL, PL1, assembler, a lot of JCL. I remember they put us in a class. They have a programmer trainee class, and they put us, because we were co-ops, through it in like a week instead of the normal 6 weeks. And it just threw books at us. And I had worked in the claims system.
Yeah.
Supporting the systems that allowed us to process your claims. And when I transitioned from co-op to to full-time, they asked me where I wanted to go. And there was a program going on in research called Image Plus, which was to digitize our paper records. So
wow.
Yeah, so that was 1984. It really became a project in like 1986. I was not allowed to do that because that was supposed to be for really smart, experienced people. Eventually, I got to work on the system, and I wrote the interface for what we would call our output capture, or we called it image coded data. We would take a picture of the form, and then I built the ability to lay the data on top of it, to choose the fonts and do an XY coordinate and render a version of the document for the MSRs to use if a member called in. And the MSR is a member service rep, normally a customer service rep. So we had DOS workstations on the computer, on the desktops of our customer service reps, and they shared one. So they each had a dumb tube, and we were using IMS text-based systems. And in the middle, there was a PC with a 8.5 by 11 display. And if you needed to look at somebody's policy or letter or whatever, you could hit a transaction and it would pop up on that screen. So that was my first introduction to PCs, because in college it was all mainframe. It was a System 360 and then a VAX 11.
Well, I was just sitting here thinking there might be a few people that hear what your background is, and they might be calling you saying, hey,
during COVID,
we're still running in that environment. Can you come and help us?
during COVID, I thought about that. Remember, all the unemployment systems got overwhelmed because all the people lost their jobs, and they're all still in COBOL. Government is just horrible at modernizing. I watched your TED talk about the Postal Service, and I agree with your supposition of where it needs to go, but man, it's going to be really hard for the government to do that.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. Yeah. And we could spend some time talking about that. For me, it just comes down to giving people choice. That's really all it's about.
That's right.
We need a vital postal service and just give consumers choice.
We do. We do.
And
I was shocked, and I've heard you say this at the Crawford Technology Forum last year that we're the fourth cheapest, or one of the fourth or fifth cheapest postal rates in the world. I did not know that. I've worked in postal and messaging customer communications for the last 40 years, and I did not know that.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting, and it's fascinating how much the Postal Service is integrated with all these conversations about what's going on with customer communications. Because, of course, if you're going to print something, the only way to get that delivered is put it in the mail. So, of course, that's why it's a big deal. But, I thought we could do today is I just had some questions framed up that I want to ask you about, or just get your perspective on. And a lot of what I'm here at Treeline Research is to really start identifying what I define as the gravity. Where is the gravity shifting in customer communications? 15 years ago, 20 years ago, the processes you described and the department would have defined where the gravity was. Like, we had to compose documents, we had to get them to the printer, we had to get them into the post. That's all changing. And so for me, I'm just exploring where that is shifting. And of course, in different parts of the world, it's shifting differently. And I just want to say, just a preference here, that of course your comments today don't represent USAA. It's just your experience and your 42 years in the customer communication business. But I want to start here. What has been the biggest sort of architectural shift that you've seen in customer communications since the mid 80s?
Is paper is becoming an option now instead of a requirement. Although the regulatory environment hasn't really changed, and it depends on your lawyer as to whether they're comfortable that you can take it out of the post office or the postal service and make it a digital delivery. In 2000, USAA filed a patent that I was on to do e-delivery. And so we've been delivering our documents via our app and our website since the year 2000. It's probably about 2003, actually, by the time it got done. So, when I would go to conferences and I would meet with my fellows in the industry, they would say, "Hey, how do you get adoption away from paper into digital?" Mm-hmm. And I would say, about 3% a year for 20 years. That's how long it took USAA to get to 60%, right? But that's changed. Now that's the default. You mentioned you mentioned your sons earlier. I have 2 kids, and they're like, they don't like paper. They don't like email. They want to know why don't I just have Slack, or why don't you just text it to me, or any other number of things, right?
Yeah. The whole term omni-channel these days is so diluted. It's sort of like, it's kind of starting to lose its meaning in my view. And again, that's a topic we can probably dig into at another time, but you bring up a great point. And even for my wife and I, we run our life on our mobile devices, right? We pay all our bills, we do everything. I mean, just bought some plane tickets. I do everything on my mobile device. Some people would disagree with that, but I think the immediacy, the convenience it's undeniable. And we'll get into AI, but when you start talking about AI and its desire just to grab all the data and everything it can about everything, staying in a digital world certainly keeps you there.
I'm old enough to remember, or to feel creeped out by some of that, but it is awful convenient.
Yeah, it is.
Our mobile devices listen to us. I don't care what they say, but it's sure very nice to be able to go to Amazon or to whatever, and it already knows what I'm there for.
Yeah, we are willing to give up a lot to get convenience, and I think people forget that oftentimes. So you discussed about how USAA was an early sort of adopter and has a patent. Or is that patent still enforced, or is it?
It is.
Okay, that's
we don't ever sue anybody over that. We do have another patent that USAA enforces for mobile check deposits. That I was also a member of that team, but that one they enforce with the other banks. But the e-delivery, I mean, USAA came at it from 2 perspectives. One, it saves a lot of money, a lot of paper and ink and toner and mail and all that stuff. But mostly, if you think about USA's membership, they could be anywhere in the world. Like we talked briefly about what's going on now. Those folks, if they have our app, they have internet access on their ship or on their base, they have access to what they need to keep their life going for their loved ones that are back at home. And that was the real genesis of doing e-delivery, was to be able to make it convenient, move from a paper world and make an electronic experience so that those folks could do business with us and take care of their life, their banking, their insurance, regardless of where they were at.
That's really interesting. I hadn't considered that. And that's fascinating. And so, wow, I think USAA deserves a ton of credit for that. That's that background, and what better reason to drive that initiative and innovate to be able to provide a better customer experience for your customers literally around the world. So in your experience, and I think you've sort of touched on this, but as USAA was going, well, maybe we should just step back. And so I think I mentioned my wife and I recently had an auto claim with USAA. And of course, a lot of stuff started showing up in the mail. So a big part of this, though, has been print. And I just wanted to make sure we talk about that a little bit. Does USAA run its own print production facility, or do you outsource that, or how did
they outsource? So USAA outsourced it 20 years ago, 25 years ago. Yeah, about 20 years ago. So they went with a company called Bound, who no longer exists, and they ultimately, Bound got bought by R.R. Donnelley. And so USAA still creates everything print ready and just uses a print provider to actually put dots on paper and get it in a mail truck. It allows us to get better postal discounts because they can merge our stuff with other clients and get deeper zip code based and neighborhood based discounts.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I live in the present. I have a hard time when things change, probably more so as I get older. But when we did away with that, I had just really learned a lot about the printing and an automated document factory and all that stuff. And it all went away. And I'm like, now what am I going to do? Right.
Yeah.
But that's still came in handy.
You went from that to just basically composing what? PDF, AFP.
So at the time it was AFP, and USA's base infrastructure created all Xerox Metacode. And we didn't want to have to manage resources on their printers like we did at home or in our own shop. And so we converted all that stuff on the fly to AFP using my favorite vendor in the world, Crawford Technology.
Hey,
there you go.
Yeah, there you go. We'll give Ernie a plug for that. Absolutely. And anytime I talk about data stream conversion, whether it's Crawford or anybody else, that is rocket science. That is, I don't think people realize how sophisticated and challenging that process is. And it's not just, hey, we got to make it print. It's, we need to hold this thing up to the light. I remember when I was at Rico, and we'd literally hold the piece of paper up to the light and go, do these dots actually line up? Does that font match? It's a lot.
That's still the golden standard, right? Except that, now we try to do that, and we do that with software. So over the last couple of years at USA, we were moving from our own infrastructure to a cloud-based provider to do that generation. And we talked about that for a decade, trying to get it off of our hardware and off of our processing. And it was all about, can I get that stuff migrated, the templates and the data migrated for me, rather than having to go recreate something from scratch. And we finally came across a vendor that would do that for us. And that was the thing. We did some digital light box comparisons, and then we could tell what the differences were so that we could make adjustments. And that made that It's
interesting. And you certainly recall the days of maybe more recent than 42 years ago, but 10 years ago, if you were talking about bringing a cloud solution into a place like USAA, I was like, please leave. We don't want.
This is going to get me in trouble. You might want to edit this out, but I call it the ops Nazis, or the ops guys that run our computer center. They still come up with these elaborate spreadsheets and presentations about why they're cheaper for storage and they're cheaper for processing than the cloud. And that may be technically true, but we're not nearly as flexible, because having to buy those servers and stand them up and build data centers, it's just always it always slows you down.
Yeah. Well, it's really fascinating about that, though. Now the new topic is not cloud, it's AI. And what we're finding, at least some of the companies I'm working with in Europe, is that they did go to the cloud and they outsourced all that. And now they lack the technical skills Now they're saying, well, we need to bring AI back in-house. We need to have this black box running in our building, inside our four walls. And they look around and go, we don't have anybody who knows how to do that anymore.
So USA still does, because we still have our own data centers, and I say we, and I'm retired. They still have their own data centers, and they still have their own ops area, and we still know how to do that.
Yeah.
USA tries to be leading edge, but not bleeding edge.
Well,
when you get
right,
when you get bleeding edge, that's when you lose stuff that you need, right?
Yeah, stuff breaks, and
you mentioned COBOL and PL1, or we talked about that. There's still a lot of systems. The system we retired to go in favor of the cloud was all COBOL and PL1 assembler. And when I was in college, I was taught that a system should last 5 years. Well, that was wrong on an order of magnitude.
No, really 45 or 50 would be better, but yeah.
And that's pretty much the reality, because nobody gets promoted for upgrading a system or replacing a system. They get promoted for bringing new capability and new experiences for the customers. And so it's always a challenge to get funding to keep things going, or to battle what we call technical debt, right?
Yeah.
And at USAA, we had this big thing. We're going to get rid of all our technical debt. We're going to work hard on it. But then that became, technical debt got defined as, I put this stuff in production last week, and there were some things that I wished I'd have done different. So that's what we would work on. And our 45-year-old systems, we're still chugging along.
Yeah. Just keep moving the goalpost, right?
That's right.
Well, that's why I commented. There was somebody from IBM just posted something about COBOL and AI to, either understand it or rewrite the code, and lots of possibilities there. But basically his comment was, be careful.
That's right. I guess before
it's a mission critical environment,
before there was AI to do it, there was a set of vendors who could take your code and restructure it. Around the 2000s, we played with some of those tools, and the code that they came up with was almost impossible to maintain. It would work, but if it didn't work, figuring out what the algorithm,
you had to call them back and maintain the, I just wanted to keep the license agreement running. I get it. Was there a point? I mean, I think USAA was an early adopter around digital, but was there a point where you sensed that digital customer communications, by that, I'm just going to say not paper, right? There's a lot of different ways to describe this, but the alternative to printing something on a piece of paper and delivering it being the post when did it really kind of dawn on to USAA and your team to say, this is the starting point of something new, something different. And, and I guess what I want to explore is what was sort of the internal struggle around that, who sort of defended the old way and who sort of was excited about where things were going.
So the people in the business who are responsible to make sure that we are compliant with the regulations were the biggest hurdle, because they would read things literally and they would say, it says you will mail this, so I have to mail it. And then there was, and I don't remember the law, but there was a law that was passed that said it was okay for a customer to opt into digital delivery. And that was the big change. We had members that were doing it because they were in the military, but that's only about 25% of our membership that are active, or it's less than that actually, that are active. And so most of our customers are just the same as everybody else's customers. They live at a fixed address. They move occasionally, even though our focus is for helping those that are supporting our country and in the military and aren't in control of where they're going to be. Everybody else gets to live with that because that's our focus. It was a big day when when the lawyers and the business people had something they could hang their hat on that said this was okay. And then as the internet grew, in the late 2000s, early 2010s, and the generation that my kids and our kids are in, paper became less of a thing. And that's when it really built momentum. Probably the first 5 or 6 years we were at, I think in 5 years, we were like at 20% adoption. And now USA is like over 70%. And now the conversations are, why are we still doing paper?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think there's a whole host of reasons we can point to, and the industry continually reminds us of those things. And what's interesting, and part of my work I'm going to be doing this year, is I'm going to go to other parts of the world and say, life is moving on just fine without paper in the mail. Bills are still getting sent. People are still paying them. Insurance policies are being renewed and claims are being made, and very little that's happening via paper. And so it is possible.
So I over the years, I changed from viewing it as a delivery mechanism to an electronic file. So Pat McGrew said something at a conference one time, and I don't even remember what conference, a long time ago. She said she suffered, I believe, her house had burned down or whatever.
That's right. You told me about that.
And she was describing how she had everything digitized and she had it on an external hard drive that wasn't in her house.
Yep, I recall this story.
And that made me realize that's what our e-delivery is. So wherever you are with
There
your
it
mobile
is.
device, your computer, whatever, you have access to everything that would normally have gone into a file cabinet. So if you lost your house, you lost your file cabinet for whatever reason, the stuff you got from USAA was still there.
Yep. No, that's a really good perspective. I think that's an important one to keep in mind, because you're right. It isn't just about the back and forth. It's about the what is and where is it and how do I access it.
Let's be honest, nobody reads their policy until they have a claim.
Until they have to, right? And they're like,
until a claim, they actually don't read it when they have a claim. They read it when their claim is denied.
Right. Like, where does it say that?
Pay as much as
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to just touch on the third rail a little bit here, as they say. And, one of the questions I'm increasingly asking some of the service providers that I work with is say, so if you had a customer that was going to start greenfield from scratch today, where would you fit into that equation? And so my question to you is sort of the same. If you were to advise a print-centric service provider, what would you say to them? What would you say to them to, in some ways, stop defending or where their focus is, or how would you advise them in terms of where we're going?
So this is because of my background, I think. They need to stop worrying about the physical aspects of what they do and start considering the experiences and the creation. So the authoring, the filing, the creation of a communication, and then deliver it however it needs to be delivered. If it happens to need to be paper, then great, but they need to be able to be that omni-channel hub, take it wherever it needs to go. I feel sort of like a hypocrite because we went down that path with Donnelly. They really pitched it hard, and I was pretty key in killing it. And it was probably just at the time, I think it was a little early. I was concerned about what happens if they go away. Just like people were, what if the cloud goes away? And that happens, right? Where it's down. So the good news is if AWS is down, our members aren't blaming USAA. They're blaming AWS because everything's down. Lots of stuff is broken. That's the good news. The bad news is that our members still can't get to what they want. And so we had an incident with a provider a few years ago where they got hacked and they were down for 11 days because USAA still created their own documents and did their own e-delivery. Most of our membership didn't know, just the people who were getting paper. And it was really checks that were a problem.
Checks
were impacted because we will do an EFT to you. USAA will. But some people just still like to have that check for whatever reason. And it happened to be at the end of the year where mandatory distributions had to happen to avoid tax problems. And we had to scramble to figure out how to print checks. But since then, I think that with the advent of the cloud and the advent of reliability in our digital infrastructure, that I think it's just like the print room. That stuff needs to move out to a provider to do all that stuff for you.
Yeah.
All the way from the creative, all the way to delivery, however you want it delivered.
But on the digital side of that equation, how do you see that? Do you believe that, my sense is on the digital side that we're going to see more and more companies insourcing that as we move into more sophisticated.
So why do you feel that way?
Because I think it sits in their stack, right? They're seeing the ability, other than the print, right? Other than the sort of commoditized manufacturing process, the digital experience, whether that's a digital form or some kind of interactive conversation, be it mobile app or whatever, I see more and more of that coming in-house as part of the broader customer journey, marketing technology stack, AI saying, I want to have my hands over on, I want to be able to touch all of that data. I mean, that's certainly the trend that we've seen in Asia, where companies just said, we're not printing anymore. And so the digital stuff, we're going to do it all, right? It's just going to become another.
Okay.
Our
technology. I can see it going that way. I just wonder, the big conflict at USAA is between marketing and what I call operational messaging. And they don't really speak to each other. The operational guys are like, no, I don't want to take a risk of it changing how it's viewed by the regulator, or the marketing aspect of it committing USAA to something that we didn't know. That's the wrong way to think about it, but that's been the predominant driver over the years to the marketing, where everything's really about fragments, right? So in the operational messaging thing, you file a complete document. You file the contract, the way it looks, pagination, fonts, everything, right? And the 50 regulatory bodies, or USA's case, 90 something regulatory bodies say, yep, that's good. And God forbid you're doing business in Massachusetts or Texas or New York, and that can take
Right.
years.
Right.
So that still hasn't gone away. And the marketing guys, they want to create, hey, I want you to always address the USAA this way. I want it to always have this look and feel, this experience, regardless of the channel. And there's an inherent conflict there that has to be resolved. How can I start managing my assets at the fragment level, yet still maintain keeping the regulators happy? Once we figure that out, then we can have a single stack to do marketing, and then we can take advantage of our billions of touches that we have regulatory wise that go today. We don't really take advantage of those from a marketing perspective. We might put a buck slip in. We might put a web app, or a web advertisement, or something flying over when in your digital experience, but we don't really integrate them. And I don't see that integrated in a lot of places that I do business with either. And I think that's the next big challenge, is how does it just become communications regardless of what's driving it?
Right. Well, and so what do you think that, you mentioned that USAA, when you left, was somewhere around 70% digital adoption, right? That's sort of a generic term, and it varies based on industries, verticals. Life insurance is way less than that, right? Utilities, it's higher than that, exactly.
The banking is the highest, right?
Yep.
Insurance is less, because people, just like our mobile app, right? Our mobile app, we have people in it all day long that use our bank. I mean, all day long, they're logged in, they're doing stuff, they're transferring, they're paying bills, they're getting money, they're scanning checks, they're doing whatever. They're checking balances. In insurance, you care when it renews, and you care when you have a claim. And life insurance, you probably don't care for years.
Till something really bad happens.
Well, that's right.
Exactly. As long as you
It's
keep
just the
paying the
nature
bills.
of the business. And so the bank really drives our experiences.
I guess my forward-looking view, that so if we move from 70% to 80 to 85, how do you think that will change the business? 70% is sort of the benchmark right now across the United States, just on average 70%. As that goes higher and higher, what do you think that will change in the business, where all of a sudden we are moving into much more of a post-print digital first?
So USAA has a concept of digital or not digital first, but a digital product. So certain products, certain credit cards, certain kinds of accounts that you buy at the bank, you can't get paper. It's created and designed to be a digital only experience. And because it's designed that way, the regulators are okay with it. It's where it's a legacy checking account or legacy credit card, they still require you to produce paper if the customer wants it. So we're going to have more digital only products as we move forward in our various industries. The other thing that's going to happen, and this I fought for years, but I finally got out of the way, and it's probably the right answer, is as we got closer to 70-75%, we started charging members to get paper. We tried over 20 years. We gave $5 off your policy. We did all kinds of stuff. We tried to leverage the green, save the planet kind of stuff, every which way you can to encourage e-adoption. We never actually charged anybody. I have a mother-in-law who's 82. I hope I got that right, because she'll get mad because she heard me, I'm sure. But as soon as USAA said, we're going to charge you $1 a month to get your bill on paper, she called me and said, hey, how can I sign up for electronic?
Yeah. I mean, it's a very interesting thing. And so, I mean, and there's a lot of data out there that sort of supports both perspectives on that. But I guess my experience has been that when you put people up against the wall, generally they're like, well, everything else is digital. So I guess it's just one more piece to, another brick in the wall, so to speak, that's going to go that direction. So you charge customers then to receive the printed statements. Did you get a lot of people that took you up on that, or did most people
Yeah, I
just?
mean, so like I said earlier that I used to say it takes 3% a year that we get adoption. Well, when we started doing that, it was like a 7% bump. It was significantly more, especially in the hardest to reach group that had just we'd asked them for 20 years or 10 years, and they said nope, 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 nope. As soon as you said, I'm going to start charging you, they say, hey, these are very cost conscious people. These are retired people. These are folks who every dollar matters, which is kind of the reason I was always against it, because, I watched my mom live on Social Security, $900 Social Security for years. Fortunately her house was paid for and all that stuff when she got there. But, it's a big impact when you start charging $1 or so. But because it's a big impact, it has a better chance of them acknowledging reality that I'm paying. Like my mother-in-law, she's paying her bills online. She's getting a lot of stuff via email, and she's logging into various apps. And she was doing that already, but if given the option, she wanted it to come in the mail. And so if you take that option away,
yeah,
then, or you start making that a little more painful, then they're okay. I can do that with, like I do everything else. And eventually the law's got to change. It's got to be to where I got to be able to deliver it in any number of things, paper included, but digital experiences as well.
Yeah, I mean, that brings up an interesting topic, and I've been reaching out to Representative Tillis actively for the last year to get an update on exactly where we are with the Improving Disclosure for Investors Act, because I believe that's sort of seen as a bellwether in the industry that, and it appears to have a lot of support. It's just that Congress has got a lot of other things on their plate at the moment. But when it does come to debate, it appears that it has a lot of support. And I think what people need to realize about that is basically what it's doing is it's providing clarity around regulations, which say things like you have to provide a written communication. It doesn't ever really specify it has to be put in the mail. But to your point, because the compliance officers and the attorneys say, well, because it doesn't say, and this is the way we've always done it, that's the way we're going to continue to do it. And I think that change in regulations is going to be fundamental. And really, it's just a shift that says digital first. You are going to be digital first. And if you want paper and you want print, okay, we can accommodate that. And I believe there should be accommodations for disabilities and things like that people shouldn't be charged for that. I think, somebody needs large print. I don't think they should be charged extra for that, but the default should be
Braille,
digital.
for instance, right?
Yeah.
So that's something that I worked on the last few years. Was accessibility became a much bigger thing, right?
Oh, it's really big.
And accessibility is all our citizens need to have the same access, right? I mean, I believe in that, whether it's ramps for buildings or whether it's being able to read their contract in a way that they can do it, whether it's Braille or whatever. Those are very expensive ways to do it, but it's required, and it should be.
Yeah. And it's not a huge part of the population either, though. I mean,
no, it's not. It's a net in terms of expenses, but so much of our strategy has been driven by cost. How can I minimize cost? How can I do this cheaper? I remember we used to print on 24-pound paper, and now we're printing on, because we didn't want it to bleed through from one side to the other. Once we went duplex, and we used to print head to toe. Do you know what that is? So,
yeah.
The military.
I got to go back to my Ricoh processor days and go, oh yeah.
So when I first started, everything at USAA was printed head to toe because of our military background, and they always put them in these folders with stapled at the top, and they could flip like this. And it took 3 years of convincing people that it was okay to do like a book or head to head. That's right. Because the world does this, because most of our customers aren't really military, and the military guys they read books too, so they can actually flip it, right? It's fine. Just because we've always done it that way and that kind of stuff. But I like to think about it at least in our industry, as obligation versus opportunity. That's sort of the marketing versus regulatory. What are we obliged to do? What are we required to do? And then what are the things that we do because of the opportunity? And then how can we merge those so that every touch is not only fulfilling an obligation, but also potentially creating an opportunity for our customers and for our business, right?
Yeah, it is about customer experience, right? I mean, it's one of those things where I always say, why do we even talk about customer experience? Let's just say, yes, you got to have it. It's important. It's really important.
That's right. And the better it is, the more healthy your company is, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, so a lot of what we've talked about is this sort of this legacy hangover is I'm really resistant to frame it as old people, of which I'm starting to feel like I'm a part of.
You see this? This is not cotton. This is
You have it. I don't. But I mean, we this is a generational thing that is going to run its course. I mean, we are going to see these legacy contracts, products, consumers move out of the system eventually. That's not to say that there isn't always going to be a place for print. Firmly and truly believe, even in my TED talk, the need for print and post is always going to be around, and it's going to be vitally important. And I believe actually the value of it, therefore, is going to go up. But what in your view is the role of the postal service in this conversation? Because if you were to go around the world, and this is what I'm studying in 2026, you go to different markets and you look at we've already talked about one. What are the things that are driving companies to adopt more and more digital? Regulations and postal cost. Those are fundamentally the two things that are doing it. And we
agreed.
issue number two, postal cost, is definitely on the radar in the United States. So what's your view on?
Well, it's interesting because another part of my life is I was a politician for 30 years. I was the mayor of my little town. Not a real politician.
That answers a lot of questions, Andy, but we'll talk about that later.
Not a real politician. I was more like the president of a homeowner association because it's 1,500 people. But I got to play real politician. One of my favorite experiences was every 2 years we would go to the Texas legislature and try to get things passed. And we would go as a group of small towns, and you would walk into a senator's office or a representative's office, and they would hand you a caucus and hey, Mr. Mayor, is there anything I can do for you, Mr. Mayor? You know, it's like, come on, dude, I'm just Andy, and 1,500 I represent. I mean, it was really kind of funny. But the Postal Service is in the Constitution, right? It's a requirement of the federal government. What it has to do is it has to, like you said in your TED Talk, it has to evolve. It has to go away from the idea of we absolutely have to quit being a junk mail service. I do something when I go to my post doesn't get delivered to my house. It gets delivered to a small post office. And when I go there, there's there's a table and there's a trash can and there's recycle bins, and I do triage. And I used to worry about it because I'd say, well, what if I throw something away that I really need? Now I'm like, it'll just come next month. It's fine.
Or it'll show up in an email because Andy didn't respond to the thing we put him in the post.
That's right. So I just go through, and unless it's obviously urgent or something that's a bill or a check or whatever, it doesn't even make it to my vehicle. Right. Yeah. And so the post office they got to be able to compete with USPS and FedEx and I guess Amazon, because they do their own deliveries. They got to be able to do that, and they really have to embrace the digital world, and they need to get out in front of it. They need to be leading edge. I think it was maybe the year 2000 or around there when digital delivery first started being contemplated. And in my experience, the very first digital delivery was bill presentment, right? You could get your bill on their web or in an email and you could pay it. And the post office, we actually had I went to a meeting with them, and they were saying, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to be able to convert your mail or deliver mail for you electronically. There's no reason why they can't do that other than the government is slow and hard for them to do that kind of stuff, right? Big bureaucracies struggle. I mean, even at USAA, which is not the hugest bureaucracy, things move slow because we've always done it that way. I'm worried about the legal ramifications, or what I like to say squirrel. There's something else that's a nice shiny object, and that's where the money goes.
We'll talk about the squirrel here in just a second before I let you go, but
okay.
But yeah, I mean what you're describing though is, I think people always assume that the decline in volume at the Postal Service was outbound communications. The reality, the first big tranche that killed volume was the payments coming back in the mail, right? With people writing checks, putting it in an envelope. I mean, I remember the days you'd have a stack of envelopes and you'd have a date on there and say, okay, this one goes in the mail this day and that day. That was the first thing that really whacked mail volumes, was return mail.
Yeah, I think so. And like, we went through graduation season last May in our area, and my wife stuck a $100 bill in an envelope and mailed it to a girl who's like a mile from my house. We go to their graduation party. She never got it.
That's just so disappointing.
Maybe it went to Buffalo, like what happened to you, and it's somewhere in the Pacific or whatever. Or maybe the mailbox got raided. Who knows, right?
Yeah, it's just disappointing. I mean, and I think that's part of what's killed holiday cards and birthday cards and, all of that, part of the postal stream has just unfortunately been ripe for
And so
that
it
kind of
just
stuff.
has to evolve, right? Just like everything else. Our founding fathers, they really were thinking about letters, right? They weren't thinking about packages. They were thinking about that was their primary way to communicate. No telephone. They
Mhm.
either that or get on their horse and ride to Philadelphia to meet and create the Declaration of Independence, right? Or the best correspondence ever between Jefferson and Adams. The lifelong rivals that ended up becoming friends via the mail, right? And they both died on the same day. On the same day. It's
That's right. I forgot that. I forgot that bit of history. And no, you're right. And a lot of regulations were written at that time, and that's the state of sort of the ambiguity in the US regulations, is because they were written in that environment. And now today we're trying to interpret what do those things mean for a world that sort of is starting to disappear.
humans like to keep things the same because and so that's an encumbrance, right? So how do you launch a modernization that's meaningful for any aspect of the government? I guess the military does a decent job. Every other part of the government's a little slower. And so we talk about the revolution of AI, the revolution of the cloud, but it all gets slowed up by people.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the squirrel, and you know what the squirrel is, right? So what about AI? As a technologist, as an architect for a leading insurance company, where's
It's
this going
just
to land?
it's so I'm a little less scared of it than a lot of people. I don't think it's going to change our world that much. I think it's just going to make everything a lot more convenient. And maybe I'm selling it short. My son is an IT guy. He's followed in my footsteps, and he's convinced that within 3 or 4 years he won't have a job. And I said, no, your job will just be different. You'll be writing prompts to create your code. I mean, I started off where we're coding in COBOL and PL1, as we talked about earlier. And if I needed to look something up, I had to go down the aisle to the technical library, pull the COBOL manual off, check it out, take it back to my desk, look up how to do something, play with it, and then return it. And then I was so jealous of the people that came along after the internet was born because they could just look it up. There was all, and then that just got better and better and better. And now AI is just a better way to create the next set of experiences and whatnot. Now it's scary because it knows so security and regulatory compliance and all that stuff's going to be a lot harder in an AI world because we're going to become dependent on it, and we're going to be less likely to know what it's really supposed to say and whether it really makes sense and whether it really commits you to the right things, unless you have really good prompt engineers. So USAA has been rewriting our core systems for a while. And one of the biggest hurdles that they've had to overcome is so many of the rules of how our products exist and what they do are coded in COBOL and PO1 and C and Java. And so there's nobody in the business that can tell you an auto policy in Wisconsin is got these things.
Mm-hmm.
Now USA has petabytes of old policies because we have to keep them for, if you're in California, for 99 years and other places at least 7. And one of the last things I was trying to convince them was put that stuff in a language model and let's build some queries and some prompts to help us know what our product currently in Wisconsin. Because the lady who did it retired 5 years ago. And by the way, she learned it from a lady who retired 20 years ago, who learned it from a lady who retired 50 years ago. And let's say lady or guy or whatever, right?
Well,
and it's because the business turns over a lot more frequently than the IT guys. It was always strange to me that IT knew more about the business in a lot of cases than our business did about our products. And it's really, yeah, if you think about it, IT's got to code it all, and they got to live with the code, and they have to make changes. And the same people are there for 10 or 15 years, and the business every 7 or 8 months, there's a new product manager, which is the late, and it's like this. There is no straight line evolution, right? And again, that's the squirrel, right? Because what's the new bright, shiny object? And right now it's AI, but it's not just that. Sometimes it's just, I can't get money to do the journey I need to do. Can you imagine at the government level where it's $6 trillion budget that they're short of money, but they are.
Yeah. Well, I forget who it is, which vendor I was speaking with, but she said, the insurance industry hasn't changed. We're doing the same thing today we were doing 50 years ago. It's just the experience has changed, right? How we're accessing the data. And I suspect after the comments you just made, there's probably a lot of vendors that are thinking, oh, I need to talk to Andy, or I wish he was still at USAA because I got a solution for that. And a lot of more people that I talk to here on my platform. But, there's people out there really trying to solve those problems of
That's right.
interrogating archives and bringing that in.
But once you solve the problem, then you have to sell it and show the value, and that's what takes a while, right? But AI is changing the rules, because what used to be a while, could have been 10 or 15 years, is now 10 months. And if you don't stay on it and stay up with it, you're going to get left behind. You said earlier that people in Europe are talking about bringing their AI language models and whatever else into their data center, but I assume because they don't want to share that and put that in the cloud, and they're worried about security and customers' privacy and the privacy laws.
That LLM learning bad habits from having access to information it's not supposed to have, right? It's literally to lock it down so that it's like.
Are you trying to tell me Grok and Gemini give you bad answers sometimes? It's garbage in, garbage out, which I think I learned 42 years ago.
That those rules still apply, unfortunately, and I think AI makes them worse.
Well, it makes it worse, and it makes a lot of people doubt whether it is garbage, because, well, the AI said. You still got to look at things with the jaundiced eye and okay, does this really make sense?
Yeah.
The simple uses, like I told you, I'm an umpire. I had an ejection. I had to write an ejection report. Well, I had a stream of consciousness, wrote a bunch of stuff. So, well, this I can't send. I sent it to AI and said, hey, I'm doing an NCAA ejection report. Here's what I wrote. Let me know what you think. And it came back with a nice, concise, bulleted list that was about a third of what I wrote. That made a lot of sense, but a couple of the details were wrong. And they were wrong because I wrote them wrong, not because the AI made them up. And it's, so it actually served another purpose that I find it useful for, is it forces me to do that proofreading, or it's that second set of eyes, or in programming, the pair programming concept where somebody else is looking over your shoulder. You can use AI as that, or you can do that for AI. I think we're a long way from the machines taking over. There was a news article a couple of weeks ago where some agentive AI created its own agent, and they were all excited about it, created its own language and created its own agent. And I said, yeah, that's probably just a thought experiment. I don't know. If I'm not worried about the singularity yet.
Yeah, you're not worried about Terminator coming in.
I'm not, but we might live long enough to see a singularity. We just don't quite understand how complicated we are yet. We keep simplifying ourselves.
Was there something you really had on your heart or your mind that you really wanted to share that we should include here?
I just had one thing that I was hoping to fit in that I'd forgotten about. I just looked at my notes that I scribbled. I remember a long time ago seeing, you talk about junk mail in your TED Talk, or whatever, whether that's the right term or not. I remember going to a conference in the 90s where somebody had saved every piece of mail they'd gotten from USAA. And this was before we really started into the digital journey. And they stacked it up for us. And it was a stack 7.5 feet tall. And at least a lot of that was somewhat useful. Maybe 20%, probably it's like 5% now. Maybe it's 2%. And so that visual, it was very powerful. I used it for a few years to sell digital journeys. And I think just thinking about all the stuff that I put in a trash can at the post office is something that I think if we just keep our eye on what is really useful, back to experience, what is really going to help our customer do what they need to do and live their life with as little interaction with us as possible. Because let's face it, they don't want to talk to their insurance company. They don't want to talk to their bank unless there's a crisis. So that way we can be focused. We can be focused on helping them when they need the help.
Yeah. No, I agree. I'm actually going to be speaking at the National Postal Forum with Mike Porter on this topic, and it's a tough one because, hey, I mean, direct mail is a real business. There's a lot of people who depend on it. It's effective. It works. And so for the industry, it says, hey, this is great, right? But as a consumer on the other end, you go, yeah, it's not so great, actually, because I don't really want all the stuff you're shoving down this pipe and throwing in my mailbox. And that's the tension, I think, in the marketplace of how do we address that? Because it does add value. It does work on one hand. But on the other hand, consumers are saying, I would like to choose to not participate in that?
Ask them if they ever thought of a concept sort of like streaming service. You can pay $9 a month and get commercials, or you could pay $15 a month and not get commercials. Can they offer a service where you don't get the commercials, where you don't get the?
Well, I think postage rate should be based on demand. I think it should be based on, you want to put a letter into Andy's mailbox. There's 6 other people that want to put a letter in Andy's mailbox this week. How much do you really want to put it there? To me, I think it should be demand driven.
So this Andy agrees. I mean, I think the market forces generally work, whether we want to admit that or not or whatever, but they generally do work. So leveraging that to drive the behavior that we hope.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm reading a lot about luxury and status symbols and how, print is a luxury item. And essentially, I think having a lot of stuff in your mailbox is going to be a status symbol. It's going to be something that says, somebody wants to talk to, and how much junk shows up in your mailbox. Direct mail, advertising mail, all that important printed matter.
Gotcha.
Is a status.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way. I do think about, at when I was in corporate America, we always had metrics. We were being measured on this and this, and the really clever metrics were the ones that were written to drive behavior. Conceptually, you think about, I'm just trying to measure what we're doing so that I can manage it. But if I really am trying to drive a behavior, then I can come up with a set of metrics that drive it, because metrics change what you do, right? And so thinking beyond the number into what you want the result to be, if the post office could do that, then they can maybe lay out their own future.
Well, Andy, I really appreciate the time today. I suspect there's going to be some folks that are going to see this and go, I wonder how much extra time Andy has on his hands these days, particularly if he knows COBOL.
My favorite language was PL1, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I don't know why.
That's one I don't even know. So that just tells
you. It was
you.
an IBM's answer to COBOL. And USAA was doing a lot of stuff in PL1 when I first started, and it was, quote, more efficient. Something that programmers don't do anymore. They don't care about efficient. They just get it to work. And there's always more processing power.
Yep. AIX. Oh my gosh. I remember having to support that in my product when I was at Ricoh, and it's just, wow. It's amazing how much of that stuff is still out there. Andy, this has been great. Your perspective is valuable, and I'm sure people are going to find your comments and insight helpful as we navigate what's next for the customer communications industry. So thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome. I enjoyed the visit.